Okay, so welcome. Even as folks are still coming in, we're going to honor everyone's time and we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. We will be recording this. We'll be finishing just a few minutes after the top of the hour. And then we will have some unrecorded time where people can unmute and we can just continue to have conversations. So we really appreciate everyone in the audience. If you will go ahead and turn off your screens and mute yourselves so that we can focus on the speakers today. We really appreciate that. And definitely interact in the chat. Please put your questions in the chat. We'll be grabbing those and try to address them if we have time, or definitely in the unrecorded time, we'll try to address those. So my name is Carol Salva, and I am just so happy to have you back for another installment of practical tips from Seidlitz Education. I'm joined again by the award-winning educator and author, Larry Ferlazzo, who will be conducting another important interview for us. You can find out more about me and about Larry when you get the slides. You can click on our images and you can get our bios. But at this point, I am going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague and co-author, Anna Mattis. It's so important that Anna join us for these because she is our Chief Product and Marketing Officer. So she knows quite a bit about, she probably knows the most about all of our resources, and she knows a lot about our guests. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Anna, so that you can introduce Allie and tell us more about what to expect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carol. It's always such an honor to be on these together with you and share the screen. So yes, as Carol mentioned, I have a very big job. I'm both introducing this amazing product coming from Seidlitz Education, as well as the amazing co-author that created it. So I'll give you a little bit of info about Allison, if Allison is new to you. Allison is from New Mexico. We love her for that. She has decades of experience as a newcomer and an ESL teacher, and she has been an educational consultant for the last 13-ish years. But the most exciting thing in Allie's life recently, it is for us, maybe not for Allie because she's exhausted, but she is the co-author of our ELPS Flip Book. So if you don't know a lot about this, our ELPS, it's the English Language Proficiency Standards. They were adopted in 2007 in Texas, and in 2010, Seidlitz Education came out with our first rendition of this ELPS Flip Book. It has been going strong, friends, for the last 15, going on 16 years, still selling. But in 2024, the state of Texas adopted new standards, and Allie has been just in the trenches researching every single standard, how they align to new proficiency levels, what to do to make this as a practical tool as possible for teachers in the classroom. And we just recently, and then, sorry, it's blurry, here we go, in the last year came out with our extended version. You can see the size, bigger, taller, longer, thicker, all the things with our latest flip book. Larry has a copy of this in his hand, so he's going to be asking us some wonderful questions about how a teacher, no matter what your content area, no matter what level of language learner you have in your hands, how you can use this to really accelerate the academic language of the students in your classroom. So I don't want to take any more of her thunder, but here's Allison.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to be here with you guys today and to share our new product or our updated product. We have kept, if you're familiar with the old flip book, the components of the flip book that made it so amazing. That is, of course, the genius of John Seidlitz, the founder of our company. So we are going to just quickly, let me tell you a little bit about what's in it, and then Larry and I are going to have a conversation about how we can use this resource. So if you are unfamiliar with the state of Texas, in the state of Texas, we call our ELPS the English Language Proficiency Standards. And within that, this is our state law for how we support language learners and what our requirements are for all teachers who have language learners in their classrooms. So within that, you're going to see two big buckets. And this is true if you're a WIDA state, if you're in California like Larry. So we have two big ideas that we are working with. We have our first bucket, which is our student expectations. And you can think of these as the standards for language. So, what are we as teachers doing to purposefully, intentionally plan for language use within our content area classrooms? So, these are our student expectations. They are included in the flip book. So, what are we doing when we're planning for listening, for speaking, for reading, for writing? How are we helping to deliberately plan those opportunities for students to use the academic language of our content area classrooms? And the second bucket within this is our proficiency level descriptors, or our PLDs. So I know proficiency level descriptors are something that we're commonly used across the states, but it is, think of it as a roadmap for how are we building language in our classroom? How are we continuing to guide students through those proficiencies? So a proficiency level descriptor tells us this is what a student can do at that level. And then as teachers, we can say, okay, I'm planning with the student expectations. Then I can look at who are the students in my classroom? How do I scaffold and accommodate for the student based on their proficiency levels? And so that is really where the genius of the ELPS Flip Book comes in. So we are going to watch just quickly, quick product little promo here. So bear with me for 2 seconds. I do need to change my sharing for 1 second. We are going to look at how does this flip book get set up. So
While you do that, Allie, I know you're making it to where we can watch the video, but I wanted to remind, if we hadn't said it at the beginning, that we're going to be sharing for anybody so they can take them away today, some of our favorite strategies that you could use tomorrow. We're going to be sharing more of that, some from the book and just some from our favorite here in just a moment, toward the end.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So to optimize how to look at this flip book, we just made a quick video. So Isaac, our one of our product team members made this video, but when we look at the ELPS Flipbook, we can see that the 4 domains of language going from top to bottom, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And then in the state of Texas, we now have 5 proficiency levels. So we can look at what can students do at each level if we are having students who have varying levels of proficiency. Then on the back of these, there are suggested activities, and those suggested activities lead you to page numbers within the book where we can look at what are ways that we can deliberately plan for that language use in our classroom. So one more time, we're going to stop sharing just a second so we can re-optimize or de-optimize, I guess, so we can talk about this a little bit more. So that is how the flips are set up. That's why we call it a flip book. We are flipping through what our student proficiency levels are. So when we look at these, we can look at our 4 domains of language. On the left, it tells us what the student can do at that level. And then on the right, it shows us what the teacher can do then to scaffold and support for our students. So Larry, what did you think?
Sure.
Do you have some questions for us about how to use this?
Sure. Well, when I first saw the book, I was pretty blown away. I hadn't really I've seen a lot of books about teaching and a lot of books about teaching English language learners, but really nothing like this with the flips. And it was the first book that I've seen that acknowledged the fact that our English language learners are not at the same proficiency level for every domain, right? I mean, there might be an intermediate language learner who is intermediate in reading and listening, beginning in writing, and maybe advanced in reading. And this book really acknowledges that and makes it easy if you know how to use it, which relates to my question about how to much easier about how to really meet the needs of the students on a micro level. So we're not just saying, okay, this student's a beginner or this student's intermediate. So these are all the strategies that they need in all the domains that we're doing. That a teacher can really personalize the the strategies that the language learner needs. So what I'd like to ask Allison is, so let's say I'm a math teacher and I've got in a primarily English proficient class, and I have an intermediate learner in some, but not all the domains. How would I use this book
Yeah.
to maximize it?
Right. So when we get back our scores from our language exams, they often give us what's called a composite score, right? So we know the student is intermediate. But just as Larry was saying, rarely is a student one proficiency level from all four domains of language. So we can build student profiles. So for example, if we are in a math classroom and we have a student who's intermediate, but that intermediate is a combination of many things. So we can see, oh, well, they're actually a little bit higher at those listening and speaking components. And so this student might have higher oracy than they do literacy skills. So we can flip to, and I'm creating a visual for us on the screen here. We can then flip to those higher intermediate for the listening and speaking. But probably what's bringing them into that intermediate level is their literacy skills. So their reading is still at that intermediate and their writing might still be at the beginning level. And so this really helps. I know when I was a teacher, sometimes I took students' oracy to be the same as their literacy. So because they could read, they could listen and speak to me, and they would often talk my ear off. Then we would get to the literacy component, and they would not have as strong of a language command. And so being able to create the profile where we look at the student at all four domains really helps us hone in and look at that. So if I'm a math teacher, I can create a profile for my student based on their scores, and I can see what can the student do? So for example, if we were going to be writing in our classroom, I could see, okay, well, my student is higher at those oracy levels. And in the state of Texas, we call them EBs. That's why you're going to see the EB student, but it's the same as EL, ELL, ML, MLL. They're all the same student. They're just different titles for those students. But I can see here that my student has a stronger command of the oracy. And so if I'm going to be doing maybe a writing activity, maybe I want my students to explain what they understood about the chart, then I can lean into, all right, maybe I want them to have a conversation prior to that writing component. And then I can even get further into looking at, if writing is going to be our strategy, what can I as the teacher do to scaffold? So yes, I can build conversation, but I can also give the student sentence stems or sentence starters to help them to use that vocabulary. I might add a visual or additional visuals to help them even get further into that content. So maybe we are going to label the visual with the academic vocabulary we want them to practice, because our end goal every content area, because students have the ability to build that language in every classroom. So how do we really hone in and focus in on that so we can build profiles for our students?
So a teacher would have be able to look online, at least in California, I'm assuming in other places, and see what proficiency level their student is at each domain. I'm assuming that's the case in Texas and everywhere else, right? Right. So
Yeah.
then, so then you could look at that on the screen and then take the book and basically literally mirror that,
Mhm.
right? By looking at it and getting the strategies that are most applicable for each domain based on their proficiency levels. Okay. Um,
Abs-
yeah. So
Go ahead.
play out for me if I'm a math teacher. What are some, how would this look for, for me? What are some things I could get out of it?
Yeah. So if you're a math teacher, let's build one more profile for us. So again, let's say we have a student in our classroom who is showing that they are advanced, or if we are a WIDA state level 5 in listening. And then they are high intermediate in speaking, but advanced in reading and high intermediate in writing. So this student really has a higher level of the input skills or the receptive skills, and maybe still needs that support in the expressive components of speaking and writing. And so again, we can look here and see, all right, I know I want my students to have a conversation in class, but I have a high intermediate student. And it's important to remember that even our students who are at that higher level of language still need support in order to get to that reclassification component. I know in the state of Texas, and this is probably true in most of our states, especially at the secondary level, we have students who are what we call long-term language learners. They're students who've been in our public ed system for 6 or more years, but have not met reclassification. So if they are kind of stalling out at that level 4 or high intermediate, what can I as the teacher do to continue to push that student, to continue to grow that academic language in order for them to then be able to reclassify? And so they're going to build language in every classroom every single day. So we can see here, let's say I'm going to have my students have a conversation and I'm going to have them speak about what they are looking for, or how they're solving a problem. Then I can see for speaking, well, my student might need a little more wait time. So maybe they're going to need to process that conversation, or process what they're going to share in a conversation prior to that opportunity to speak. So I can look here and see on the right-hand side that I, as the teacher, can scaffold for the students looking for that component of, okay, if they're going to talk, then I want to be able to provide that quiet think time before I ask them to answer. I might need some help with pronunciation around academic vocabulary. If I'm in a geometry classroom, and we're talking about complementary angles, that is a hard word that requires a lot of vocabulary and practice. So I might need students to echo. So I might say the word, then we're going to practice the word so that when we ask students to have that conversation, they feel comfortable with that language. So that echoing or repetition of that academic vocabulary. And then I can look at, okay, I'm going to take that same speaking and I'm going to turn it into writing, because we can continue that output with our students. And I can go further down into that opportunity and look at what can I as the teacher do to scaffold that writing. So, okay, we just had a conversation. Do they need a sentence stem? Do they need a word bank? How can I help them to be successful to continue to use that academic language in the classroom?
Well, and Carol left an important note in the chat that even though the scores, the English proficiency scores, are static and once a year, obviously our students are going to be growing and at different speeds, and it makes it very easy for teachers to just flip one and look at it, and use it. We use our teacher judgment about where we think our students have advanced. And we don't have to look through lots of chapters in the book to try to figure out, what, for example, our ELL teacher's toolbox is like, it could be a weapon. It's so thick, 600 words, 600 pages. This, you can just um, look through these tabs and just flip one and get an idea of how to adapt your teaching based on the advancement that the student has made.
Absolutely. And so we can see on the front, what can the student do? That's what's on the left. And then as the teacher, what can I do to support that student? We can dig even further into these. On the back of those flips, you're then
Excuse
going to
me,
see.
Allison, before you continue, someone in the chat asked if there's some way to increase the size of the page. Is that possible?
Oh, I'm sorry. I know there
It isn't?
unfortunately is
Oh,
not.
okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well, I did mention, I knew it was hard for you to do that, but everybody registered, they're going to get a copy of the slides. So they're going to be able to zoom in when you get them. right? I mean, we'll have send those as a PDF.
Yeah, you'll see these as a PDF.
Absolutely. And you can make them really big.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Allison.
No, you're good. You're good. So on the back of these, then, so on the front is what can the students do, and then what we as teachers can do on the to scaffold. But on the back of them, we can even look at suggested activities. So in the front, again, what can the student do? What can the teacher do? But then, what are suggested activities if I'm planning an activity in my classroom? So Squeepers is a great activity for reading. It is a great pre-reading, reading, post-reading strategy in any classroom. Our goal when we looked at activities are what are cross-curricular activities that we can use. So if we're in math, if we're in science, if we're in art, if we're in auto tech, if we're in floristry, what are cross-curricular activities where teachers can focus in on students using that academic vocabulary? So Squeepers, a really wonderful reading strategy. So the back of the flip will tell you what is the strategy. That will lead you to a page number where you can find in the middle of the book what is that strategy laid out for us. And then we can go even further into the appendix of the book and look at the language functions. So, okay, in Squeepers, the last thing that we want our students to do is write a summary. Well, how do I prepare students for a summary? And so we can go into the language function section and look at what is the type of language we would want our students to use. So when we talk about language function, we're talking about how is language organized and what are those components of language we would want students to have access to in order to be successful and understand when we are reading or when we are speaking or when we are writing something academic. How do we help them understand how language is organized and then organize their thinking to then be able to share that same idea?
Great.
Yeah. So,
Well, I think, where are we here? I think,
I'm going to share a little bit more about language functions if you're cool with that.
okay.
All right. So in that language function section, we're really going to find how language is organized and resources within that. The Padlet that I shared at the beginning, and we're going to share at the end, is where we can find some of this information. But we want to think about how language is organized and how we can help students to be really successful with that. So let's say we were in a science classroom. We might ask our students different types of questions. So I might ask my students to describe a favorite animal, or I might ask my students to explain the life cycle of a butterfly, or I might ask my students to explain how dolphins and sharks are similar and different. And these things all require different types of language for our students to be able to use. And so I'm going to ask us just to take a second in the chat. If you see we have 1, 2, and 3 here, I want you just to tell me, what do you think each type of these questions are asking? So question 1, what type of function is that? So at the bottom, we see those 3 types of functions. So let's give everybody just 30 seconds. Let's see in the chat. Can you tell us what kinds of functions we're asking our students to use? All right. Yeah. So if we look at these, we can absolutely see that we're asking our students to do different things at different times. So when we're asking students to describe their favorite animal, we want a description. That's going to require different language than if we're sequencing. So when we explain the life cycle of a butterfly, that's sequence. And then to compare and contrast, we want even different language for that. When we look at the components of WIDA really breaks it down into this idea of language functions and then language features. So understanding the function is step 1. What are we asking them to do? But then we're asking, what are the features of that language? How are we getting students to be successful with that? So we would want to be able to use things like transition words. How do we show students what we're looking for when we're asking them to use different types of language? So we would want, if we're sequencing something, first, then, next, finally, versus if we're comparing and contrasting, we would want to hear similar to as opposed to in contrast. So helping students to have access to that language. And then it's about practice. How do we provide that opportunity for practice so they get familiar with and comfortable with that language? And then we can add stems. Stems gives them that opportunity to practice language and gives them the opportunity to practice grammar structures that maybe they're not as familiar with. And how do we continue to push them? So I love this quote. This quote is from Echevera. She talks about that stems are there for language students cannot independently produce. So again, knowing what language level our students are at, so we know where we can continue to push them. So we can start with simplistic language. The main idea is, but then how do we grow that language so students are continuing to push into those higher order thinking skills and into that higher complex language? So it starts with the main idea is, but it ends with, in my opinion, blank is the most significant idea because. So continuing to grow that language for our students who are at those higher levels. How are we going to continue to ask them to produce more language and more complex language? So again, the ultimate goal here is biliterate, bilingual, bicultural students who feel comfortable and have that academic language to move beyond our classrooms into careers, into college, and feel comfortable with that language. And so how do we really set them up for success with that? And then, of course, we can add graphic organizers to that to help them to organize their ideas, prepare for what they're going to say, or if we're reading something, organize what we're reading so we understand what is the author trying to show us. And so language functions are in the book, but they are also in the Padlet. So when we look at that Padlet, I've shared those resources in the Padlet so that we all have access to that. How can we help students to organize those ideas? And then how do we help them have access to that language at their level in order to continue to grow that proficiency?
And the Padlet link will be part of the PDF, correct?
Absolutely. And it will also be in an email for you.
Okay.
And we already dropped it in the chat a couple of times too. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And if people don't have a copy of the book and want to get it, you go to the Sidelet site.
Yes. And in the Padlet, in that additional resource section, that far, far right section, there's a link right there to it. So the book cover is right there. You click that, it's going to take you directly to the Sidelet's education site.
Cool.
Allie, can I just say thank you for all the things that you put on this Padlet, free resources for people under listening, speaking, reading, writing, and additional resources. You have so many webinars here and short videos and strategies that people can use right away. So I just think the Padlet alone is a gift, and you spend a lot of time putting that together. I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love. So I know as teachers, we don't have a lot of time to go hunt down resources all the time. So having a place where we have some of those additional resources, and these are resources that I have found, that my colleagues have found, or that teachers that I work with have found and shared with me and said, this really worked in my classroom. And so just having a place, it's a growing, living document. So as teachers share, we're going to continue to add to that. So we'll make sure everybody has access to that Padlet and access to those resources. So I shared some of my favorite things. Let's take a moment before our time is up and let's let you guys share some of your favorite. What are some of your favorite strategies for really building that academic language in all content area classrooms?
Okay, I'll go first with mine. So you see it up on the screen. It says scanning. Scanning is a strategy that it's featured in a lot of the work that we do, but in this product particular, we have it as a reading strategy for our intermediate and our high intermediate strategies. And if you're not familiar with scanning, think about what happens when your students receive a piece of text and it's filled with words that might be unfamiliar to them. Well, what could happen? That could have the ability to shut one of our students down, right? So instead of doing that, as a teacher, you would ask a student to grab grab that text in their hand and start scanning from the bottom and look for those words that are really and truly unfamiliar to them. They can use a dictionary. Then they can work with a partner. They could talk about it. They ask you. You have rich discussion about it. And then that way, when they can identify those barriers to their understanding, then it really does just help lower that affective filter and make the whole piece of text even more comprehensible. So again, that's my favorite one for this. And I think that's really, really helpful and rich for all of our content areas. What about you, Larry?
Well, I call this academic question and answer. And it also connects to the fact a lot of research shows that it's important for teachers to demonstrate humor in the classroom to facilitate student engagement. And what I do, either it's easy to find online a list of academic words by grade level or by grade level by class, or in anticipation of academic language that I would be using in the next few days, I would show a question on a slide using an academic word that would be humorous. So, for example, I would ask students, is it an exaggeration to say that Mr. Ferlazzo is the best teacher in the world? Okay. And then there's an answer frame, yes, it is an exaggeration, or no, it isn't an exaggeration, to show. So students would have to write it down, fill it out. They would split up with partners, obviously, share with the whole class. And then they would have to write another sentence, write another question using the word exaggeration that they would they would share with their partner and share with the class. And they would do this in a notebook. So periodically we would say, okay, practice the last 5 academic question answers that we would do. And by the end of the year, obviously, they would have an extensive one that we'd be reviewing. So that worked pretty well. Carol?
I love that. Thank you. And your humor is always my favorite. So thank you, Larry. So one of my absolute favorites from this book, and it's just been for a while, wit elaboration stems. And so they can be used in 2 different ways. These are elaboration questions. What we want to do is try to get our students into the habit of extending their conversations. So, and sometimes that's not their default. It's not quite often. They're not elaborating. So if they do get stuck in a conversation, we want them to have more higher order conversations. So even our most marginalized students can ask their partner, but why? Why do you think that? Or if I was having a conversation with you, Larry, and you were telling me about exaggeration, I could say, is there another way to say exaggeration? Can you say it without using that word? Or tell me more about exaggeration. So it makes at the justification level, why, analysis level to explain concepts using other words, or just elaboration. These are higher levels of Bloom's. But I love that it does double duty. If you have posters and this is your habit, as a teacher, it's rigor in my pocket. So I can differentiate when I call on students. If it was an easy question for them, these are going to remind me to question at higher levels. So wit is one of my favorite things. Using academic conversations is a good place to use them.
Awesome.
Okay.
No, I love it. And wit is in there. I love wit. Wit is a great one, easy to model as a teacher. So yes, we're going to have our students do it. But when we're having questioning in class, if a student says, oh, the answer's 5. Oh, can you tell me more about how you came to the number 5? Really easy one to model. Really phenomenal strategy. So thank you guys so much for sharing. I know we've kept everybody just a little bit over time, but please remember, well, one, we're gonna be here for a little bit after. So if you want to hang out and just chat with us, that is absolutely, we would love that. But for our resources, we do have a lot of wonderful resources online that are free. Carol has a podcast regularly. We have our blog that is continuously being added to, and these webinars are recorded. They are recorded and shared. And so any webinar that we've done or that we've done with some of our partners are also free resources on our website. We invite you to visit that website at any point. We will have another webinar coming up. We don't have an exact date yet. It is summer, so we know that everybody is off and doing wonderful things and enjoying this weather. So keep your eyes peeled. We will have an upcoming webinar soon, and that information will be posted on our website and, of course, on our social media. So we invite you to join us on social media as well. But that concludes the recorded portion of our day. So Carol, if you don't mind, we can hit or stop recording. And then we would love to just chat with anyone who wants to hang out and chat with us.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thanks to everybody who tuned in.